Thank you everybody for coming. Try to be respectful of your time. It's 6 o'clock, so we'll get started. We appreciate very much the opportunity to share with you the information you're going to see tonight, and we very much look forward to hearing from you, whether that be your voice at another time or your voice here this evening or just your participation in being here. The agenda is pretty simple. There are 3 sections to the presentation. The first section I will take, and that section will be about the 2017 referendum, and then ESSER dollars, which I'll explain to you when we get there. Second portion of the presentation is John Huenink from Kraus Anderson, and then the third portion of the presentation is from Troy Miller from LHB, an architectural firm that we work with. So those are the 3 parts, and then truly the last portion is yours, however you want to proceed on that, whether it be comments, questions, or adjourn. So I'm going to run through. Becky, do you want me to run it or are you going to run it? Okay, I think I should be able to handle it. I didn't screw it up too badly last time I was up here. Gotta make sure I got the right spot. Okay. In 2017, we passed a referendum in the school district of Amory. It was a 1.9 million, in essence, override, which was broken into the following categories. And the category that I would ask you to focus on now is the maintenance and security, since that's what we're here to talk about tonight, maintenance and security. So of that 1.9, 700,000 was devoted for that piece of the work that needed to be done. It is a recurring referendum, which means each and every year. So that's been in place since 2017. So you might ask, what did we do with that money? So this is a depiction. And if you haven't received the hard copy, they're outside of the door if you want to follow along. In 2017, 2018, we redid the family and consumer ed classroom, which is, in essence, on the other side of the gym, that direction. The classroom setting was entirely out of date, so we spent money to upgrade that facility, and we actually now cater out of that facility to our community. In 2018-19, we did an upgrade at the elementary. The elementary is 1967 vintage. It is 54 years old. The entryway in the exterior really needed a facelift. Structurally, the building is pretty strong. It was built sort of fortress-like, but it needed some work. So those items are what we addressed at the elementary in 2018-2019, again, from April of 2017 money via referendum. 2019-2020, a variety of things in 3 different buildings. Through wall flashing, tunnel waterproofing, parapet. If you don't know what that is, you're talking water in rooftops, and that we did at the middle school, and then LED lighting at the high school. 2020-21, so last year, carpeted hallways at the middle school, vinyl tiling at the high school, the tiling that you walked in on, the vinyl tiling there. Tennis courts, doubled our tennis courts from 4 courts to 8 courts. Prior to that, our kids were walking/running down to North Twin Park to participate, and that's not a short hike from here, just to participate in an activity that they chose to be in. PAs and clocks, and then the lights in this auditorium. The auditorium is probably used as much as any venue in the entire community of Amory. If not here, then the gymnasium, and this is second. So that was in 2021, and then 21-22. All of this done this past summer. Playground equipment fully installed, thanks to parents as partners for helping make that happen. They contributed half of the cost of that equipment. High school gym floor, if you haven't been in there, it looks spectacular. I was just in there a little bit ago. Volleyball was practicing. Our gymnasium is probably one of the finest in all of Northwest Wisconsin, and the upgrade certainly makes it look even better. School vehicles, our vehicles were decades old with hundreds of thousands of miles. Through wall flashing, if you're not familiar with what through wall flashing is, think of it this way. It's that which keeps the water out of the interior of the building. It has the water go out in this building was built in 1976. So this building is 45 years old. There are through-wall flashing issues all the way around this building, and you'll hear more about that as we get into Troy and John's presentation. Flooring in the classroom at the intermediate and middle, terrazzo at the middle, and then an upgrade of a middle school classroom at the middle. So those are all items that we addressed through our budget via referendum from 2017. In 2022, 2023, none of this has been formally acted upon by the board. These are just, at this point, proposals for what we might do. This is subject certainly to change. The board hasn't weighed in on this. They haven't had a conversation about this. They haven't even seen this until now. So these are all potential items that we might address. So what I would hope you would take away from the previous 6 or 7 slides is we're not just waiting for referenda in order to be able to address our issues. We're trying to do that as we can over the course of time. But what you're going to see here this evening, the needs of the district in regards to deferred maintenance are far bigger than a $700,000 price tag. In addition, from COVID, ESSER funds, which is federal dollars, ESSER stands for Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief. Those dollars sent from federal government to public schools across the nation, and ESSER dollars specifically state the federal government specifically permits the use of ESSER for testing, repairing, and upgrading projects to improve air quality in school buildings. So what did we do with our ESSER allocation? The elementary school, again, 1967, the ventilation system at the elementary was already failing, and we had a need, now more than ever, for improved ventilation. So we have an entirely new ventilation system at the elementary and cleaned all the associated systems. So since day one at the elementary school, the ventilation system has never been better, and we're 54 years later. So we used $546,000 to address an $836,000 project. The rest was financed through district budget. So that's what happened through ESSER dollars. Now I'm going to turn it over to John, and he's going to talk to you about deferred maintenance. Think of deferred maintenance as that which needs to be fixed. And John's going to walk through that with you now. You're up.
I'm up. That's the clicker? Or...
Yep, clicker is right there at the top.
Okay, all right. Am I on? All right, again, my name's John Huenink with Kraus Anderson. A little bit about myself. I've been at Kraus Anderson for 26 years now. 95% of my career is helping school districts throughout the Midwest on things like we're talking about tonight. One more fact, and hopefully no one brought any eggs with them. I am a Baldwin Woodville graduate, so don't hold that against me, but I did spend a lot of time in Amory as a kid. So a little bit on deferred maintenance. Make sure I get the right button here. It's what Shawn's been talking about, right? It's obvious. It's site work, your mechanical systems, electrical systems, your exterior envelope of your building, interior finishes, low voltage, those items on the list right there. So basically what we do, whether it's ourselves or Troy, walk through the buildings and list each item, quantify it, apply a cost to it, and then a priority to it. And we'll get into that in a little bit more. Here's the priority. So if things are a priority 1, right, they're more important in terms of a need. They should be done in the next 3, 4, 5, 6 years or before 7 years. It's maybe on a maintenance, you're just putting a lot of money into the system or whatever it is, and it should be replaced sooner than later. Priority 2 is after 7 years, and obviously priority 3 is less. The reason we do this, 1, what's our high priority, but when a district and a school board is considering a referendum, those items that are typically in a priority 1, like, hey, that might want to make the list. They're above and beyond what you're already doing with your money that Shawn just talked about, so we prioritize them that way, okay? So the costs you're about to look at, they're not bids, right? There's no drawings yet that exist. They're based off history. They're based off experience. Sometimes we talk to a vendor, maybe it's a roofing vendor, mechanical, flooring, whatever it may be, to help us do pricing. And then we got to put appropriate inflation on there for when we think the work will get done. And the projects include what we call an owner and a soft cost. You're going to have permits, design fees, testing, all the contingencies, bonding costs, insurance, equipment, things like that. So it's an all-inclusive cost when we talk about that. Okay, beyond the budget, and again, it's beyond the budget again, where Shawn talked about the dollars that you have from your recurring referendum that already passed, okay? These are things above and beyond that the districts, and most school districts throughout the state of Wisconsin, they just don't have appropriate dollars to keep up with their building. I've been in my house for 25 years, and what's happening? Last year, I replaced a furnace, air conditioner, my well, my septic went out. You know, it's one thing after another. But once you get hundreds of thousands of square feet with a lot of bodies in it, that obviously gets to be a lot bigger. So beyond the budget, and I'm going to go through these pretty quick. If you want more explanation on any of them, just please interrupt me and ask. So at Lean Elementary, we have caulking, we have roofing on the 1967 portion, flooring that hasn't been replaced yet, restroom upgrades, which include code upgrades, okay, to bring them to today's codes, classroom cabinets, media center upgrades, another man lift, hot water piping at the classrooms, and heating and cooling. 2.7 million, it's a bigger number, but considering the age of the building, it's not that bad considering. Intermediate school, parking lot, tuck pointing at some of the columns and stucco areas, miscellaneous roof repairs, gym floor, another man lift, heating coils, building automation system, okay, that's the digital controls that cool, you know, to call for heat and cooling, and LED lighting for energy reasons. Okay, the middle school, gym finish, tuck pointing, miscellaneous roof, some very similar things, flooring, repairing ceilings, scoreboards, cooling tower replacement, and heat pump. Some of those may get done next year that you saw on Shawn's list, and if they do, then they'll come off this list here. Okay, so we'll track those accordingly. Now here's, I shouldn't call it a fun one, right? The high school, the building we're in. There's a lot of things going on here, and I'll show you one number in a little bit. Again, above and beyond the budget for the high school. Sidewalks and parking lots, the face brick and tuck pointing, a lot is getting on right now. You saw that happening this summer. The rest of the building should be done. And what happens, well, every building's a little bit different, but unfortunately, some buildings that were built in the 70s and 80s, the flashing and the tuck pointing start to fail. So people think like a brick is waterproof, and it's really not. It really sucks in moisture, there's condensation, and that needs to weep out the building. And when it can't weep out the building, moisture sitting around isn't a good thing. You fix the worst areas, but there's still much more to do. Exterior door replacement, some more roofing, flooring, science room upgrades, restrooms, ceilings, and some general painting. Locker room upgrades, fire sprinkler. So you don't have fire sprinklers now. Most likely, when you start remodeling a building, the state fire marshal is going to require you to sprinkle your building. Some plumbing and piping upgrades, exhaust and airflow in the shop areas, exhaust fans. This is one you want to circle. This is a big one, the 9.7, 9.8 million for the mechanical system in here, okay? It's just not working well, okay? In terms of efficiency, in terms of indoor air quality, and in terms of a continuing maintenance issue. And it's a big building, and to redo this mechanical system, the recommendation would be a low volume displacement, just bringing in a lot more fresh air and good air. And we can get into detail later at different meetings if you want, or if you have questions. So it'd be completely redoing the mechanical system in this building. Along with that, there's cutting and patching just to get the work done, building automation, electrical switchgear and panels. Because of that, would need to be upgraded because of the mechanical upgrades. Emergency generator and light fixture work for energy reasons. And then we have the site work, okay, or grounds, press box, scoreboard, service road, and sewer line tie-ins. So once you add those up, they add up quick, right? So no one's recommending today or suggesting anything right now that you're gonna do a 32.8, those are the priority ones, if you can see it, a almost $8 million referendum. It's gonna get scrutinized a lot more and talked about a lot more and what's gonna be a priority one or not. What you're looking at here is an FCI, facility condition investment, where you take deferred maintenance, divide it by your building cost, replacement cost. A lot of large corporations and developers use this if they're gonna decide, should I remodel my building or replace my building, okay? So you can see at your elementary school and intermediate and middle school, you're in fair condition, okay? A lot of money, you need to invest in it, right? Take care of your assets. But your high school has a lot more going on. It's more in the critical stage. And again, beyond the budget. So it takes a referendum to get it back into the yellow or back into the green, okay, to make it worth that investment. And then we have the priority twos, which is another almost $6 million. Those are big numbers, that's why we have you here, and there'll be a lot more communication about deferred maintenance as we move forward. Okay, what's next? We're gonna continue to refine the plan, look at the numbers, look at the priorities, bounce ideas off community groups. There's gonna be more than one, that's tonight, right? And other meetings. There most likely will be a survey done this fall, asking the broader community, educate them a little bit. What do you think about deferred maintenance, educational adequacy, that Troy's gonna talk about in a little bit. And then we're gonna revamp the plan based off that, off your feedback and that survey. And then for potential referendum next spring, just depending on what you think, what the survey says, and ultimately what the school board decides to do. So with that, I'm going on to Troy, unless anybody has a question on deferred maintenance. In other words, I can answer them later too if you think of it. Okay?
Well, good evening. My name is Troy Miller, and I've been doing nothing but education projects for about 30 years. And I have 3 siblings, all are classroom teachers. My wife is the business manager for 3 school districts. And when I talk with a lot of them, you know, they're always quizzing me on why does it cost so much to do this, or why does it cost so much to do that? See if I find the right button here. Oh, there it goes. When we talk about what is it that we do, and when we talk about educational adequacy and a number of other things, the first thing that we go back and talk about is going through many of the points that John brought up. What we do is we go in and we fix a lot of those things. For example, the work that's being done on the walls out there in terms of fixing the through wall flashing, the masonry and whatnot that's on the outside of the media center addition. I was at the Dairy Queen a few weeks ago after I did my inspection and needed some ice cream to cool off a bit. And while I was there, I heard people saying, "Did you see the stone that they're putting on the high school?" And I had to just kind of think about that a little bit. And then I had the board meeting that evening and went back and just informed people that, guess what? This is what I hear and that this is what people assume. But guess what those panels on the outside of the building are? They're concrete. They're just tinted to look like cast stone. And why would we use something like that? The reason is because it goes up cheaper, more economically, and a whole lot faster than brick does. And when you see the radiuses as you go around the building, you can see why we would use stone, because we have fewer joints. And as brick curves, it doesn't do a good job of bending and the joints start to come apart. But then also the through wall flashing that John mentioned at the bottom of the wall. When the school was originally built, in order to cheapen up the cost of construction, lots of firms went with basically PVC plastic that goes underneath the brick through the wall to drain water out the bottom. And over time, what do you think happens with that PVC? It breaks, it cracks, and then as it breaks and deteriorates, what happens to all that water that runs down the inside of that wall? It was actually running inside the building into the media center. And you could tell that because what happens to the paint? It begins to flake off. We actually saw water inside the building because up above the roof where it was coming apart, water was getting in and staining ceiling tiles and things of that nature. But so many things that we've done over time that we thought were going to be better materials, cheaper, faster, haven't always worked out that way. And through-wall flashing is becoming the most expensive part of it. That one little project on the outside that you see around the media center cost how much do you think? $207,000. And we didn't get very far around the building, did we? So when you saw the number of $3 million, that's a lot of work that needs to be done. And we actually fixed a portion of it outside the family and consumer ed area when we did that lab renovation because that brick was so bad that it needed to be pointed at that time. But when we start taking apart a building and you start addressing all of the things that are of needs, whether it's looking at, okay, we're going to replace the mechanical system, we need to upgrade electrical, we need to start looking at the energy code. People say, how come it costs so much more today to do a building than it did a long time ago? And the reason is because codes continue to change, building practices change, and the best example of that is the high school needs a new roof. Guess what we need to do when we do a new roof? We need to thicken the insulation to meet the energy code. That's required by law. Well, guess what happens when we thicken the roof insulation? The snow doesn't melt. So as snow accumulates on the roof, what do we know snow is made out of? Water. How much does water weigh? A lot. So guess what we have to do as part of the roofing project? We have to add structural steel underneath the roof inside the building to carry all the additional snow load because it's not melting anymore because we have more insulation on top. And as you go through the building, there's more and more instances just like that where we're going to go in and fix something and it's a domino effect of, well, now we need to do this, now we need to do this, and now we need to do this. And all of that isn't done or driven by John or myself. All of that is driven by code and law. And so as we go through and start doing those improvements and upgrades, it is amazing how quickly costs continue to climb. And so when you look at the building, this is just one building that I'm working on this summer where we're taking things down, tearing it apart, rebuilding it, trying to get it all done in a summer. All of a sudden, when you take all that stuff out, what's left? Not much. And when you look at the code for fire ratings and things like that, many of our interior walls need to go up to structure to make sure that if there is an event, smoke and those types of things are contained and controlled. So many of the walls inside your high school don't go up to structure. So those things would have to be modified. And all of a sudden we say, well, if we're doing all of that, might it be advantageous to look at what we can improve further on the educational side? And so when we talk about education, we talk about lots of different things, safe and secure strategies. I was the architect for Red Lake, good, bad, or otherwise. I've had violence happen in 4 of my buildings now. And last week I got to have a little powwow with Homeland Security, Metro SWAT representatives, 3 law enforcement officials, administrators from a number of school districts, and we sat down and talked about safe and secure. What are those strategies? What should be done? How much glass should be in a school? If there is glass, what's an exiting strategy? If violence does occur? And at the end of the day, we all agreed on the fact that number one thing that we want to address is at the middle school, high school level, bullying and how all that works. But those are all things that we can take care of as long as we're redoing so much of the building already. The impacts of technology. When I was here 3 years ago, technology was a very different conversation than it was today. Technology is being used and incorporated in ways that weren't even thought of 3 years ago. And so how does the classroom and how do other programs start to change to integrate technology and reflect the purchases that you've already made? Kindergarten and all those programs are short of space. Mainstreaming students with special needs. When I was in high school, there were no kids with special needs. They were sent to other facilities, and the school that I graduated from had no services provided to kids and students with special needs at all. Very similar to the buildings that are here. A lot of those buildings didn't have to accommodate the types of special needs kids that we see today. So ADA was the first big step in having us address those. And then emphasis on exploration of student interests, changing role of the media center, and the list goes on and on and on. Bottom line is, a lot has changed since I graduated from high school, because this building was completed before I graduated from high school, and I'm hopefully thinking about retiring in the next few years. So when you think about teaching and learning and you think about what those opportunities look like, that's really what we're talking about, and how far can we stretch that budget. With regard to safe and secure planning, this is just an example of what we do. Whether it's elementary, middle school, or high school, technology, doors, frames, and hardware, all those things play a very important role in how we begin to design and think about organization of space. Academic areas. Right now, when you look at academic areas, especially at the middle school and high school level, when you bring kids into a classroom, Mrs. Smith has 24 students. Do they all learn the same way? Nope. Do they all have the same interests? Nope. Do they learn at the same pace? Nope. And so what happens to that classroom the further the student moves along? Kids start to lose interest, their grades start to drop, they start to find other things to do, and some of them are great, some not so great. But how do we begin to think about the classroom, especially at the middle school and high school level, so that all those kids don't get left behind and everybody finds something that's interesting to them? So if you look at this little academic commons area here, you'll see that what we do today is we actually bring space to the students to limit how many kids are wandering and moving about the building looking for specialists. Number two, we try to look at and say, what is it that's needed inside the classroom, so that kids that are working at different paces, different levels, all find ways and all find meaningful things to do, so that they continue to progress and find the things that they enjoy. When it comes to media centers, I am doing a middle school right now and a high school right now, and guess what they don't have? Those two buildings do not have media centers. They do not have libraries. Any book that's needed for a particular piece of curriculum, those books are located within the department, and the media center has become something very different. The Media Center is all about supporting a variety of interests. It's looking at academic support. It's looking at a variety of things that people didn't even think about 25 years ago or 30 years ago. I think, what year was the Media Center built here? 97 it was built, and I can tell you when I was designing in 97, I was not thinking about how technology was going to transform the way teaching and learning happened. So right now, when you go to your media center, 9 times out of 10 when I walk in the building, how many kids do you think are in that media center? Yes? 0. And one of the things I thought would be a great exercise is to look at how many books actually get checked out of the media center. I did a 8-12 facility, secondary building, and that was for Spring Valley in Minnesota. Over 2 years, guess how many books were checked out of that library for free reading, not tied to curriculum? 14. And my daughters had more books loaded on their Kindle than were in that collection. It's pretty amazing how much technology is changing all of these different places and all these different things. Even with regard to labs, we talk a lot about labs, flexibility, creating those spaces of interest, incorporating new technologies as well as the old. And one of the programs that we've done that has been very popular, a number of districts have looked at your facility and said, that's what we want, not only across Wisconsin, but Minnesota as well. Your Family and Consumer Ed lab is one lab that is being replicated all across the Midwest because of the fact that students are interested, students are engaged, and they enjoy the program. One little fact about that space is when you look at it, it's the bottom right image. What don't you see in that picture? Chairs. There are no chairs. So when kids go to that room, they're in there, Shawn, I think they're in there for 45 minutes? They're in there 90 minutes. And in 90 minutes, no one sits down. No one asks for a chair. And that's because they're up, engaged, and they're interested in what's going on in that space. And that's pretty exciting to see. Furniture layouts. Furniture is almost as big a deal today as is the classroom space itself. So if you look at the two images there, both of those are classrooms. They have the exact same furniture, but when you talk about flexibility, that's what we mean today when we talk about what is a flexible classroom and how does it work. The other thing is the front of the room. It used to be you had the teacher stood at the front, you had rows of desks that go in the back. What happens at the back of the room? That's where everybody who doesn't want to participate in class sits, right? So we spend a lot of time looking at how do we shorten that distance to make sure that everybody can hear, everybody's engaged. And if you see that image up there, the two little images in the top right, it was a study that I did for North Dakota, and they created staff development classrooms where teachers go to Minot State and they learn how to teach in rooms that are non-traditional. And that was just a ton of fun. A lot of great things came out of it, and I learned a lot along with the staff that's using it. This is the district and the buildings where they're located. John talked about lots of needs, and even when you start looking at the number of acres in terms of maintenance, there is a lot that goes on this site that most people don't even realize. At the elementary school, the biggest complaint that folks have when I meet with them is space, 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 space. Enrollments continue to rise. At the board meeting, it was mentioned how many kids are being added to that facility this year?
As of today, 50 new elementary kids.
So the numbers keep going up, and the number of spaces is unchanged. And so there's a big need for space at that building, which includes not only the elementary in the traditional sense, but also the early learning center. At the intermediate, or middle school rather, or this is the elementary school, I'm sorry. At the elementary school, we have issues with accessibility, ADA, supervision of kids at the bathroom and other amenities. We look at how do we pair up spaces and how do we look at efficiencies. We don't want to build any more space than we absolutely have to. The reason is because every square foot we build has to be maintained, cleaned, lit, air conditioned. The more square feet we build, the more you have to pay for on the operation side. So we go through exercises like this to make sure that we're building the tightest building that we possibly can, but still allow for other things to happen. Other things to consider are the classroom space and the furniture. Storage is always an issue at elementary school, the media center design, and the development of all of the spaces that continue to engage kids no matter their interest, learning levels, and so on and so forth that I talked about earlier. Things that we looked at and considered were, what if we developed an early learning center with a community center and did that separate from doing an addition to the elementary school? Lots of folks thought, well, if we built a separate building, what does that mean versus doing an addition to each of the buildings, whether it be for an early learning center, community resource area, or some sort of pool amenity? Well, when you look at it and say, well, there's our program, it would cost X number of dollars. If you think about it, there's lots of things then that all of a sudden get duplicated, right? So now we need additional parking. We have to deal with stormwater management plans for a virgin site. We have to get people to and from that site. We still have food service issues that need to be questioned and developed. So we have additional cooking space or at least proofing space to hold food. And so all of a sudden we said, well, would we be better off then looking at taking those same amenities and adding it to the elementary school that exists, and would that be a better thing to do as an investment? So when you're looking at doing an addition to the elementary school, we know that the electrical system needs to be upgraded, and some of that's happening already with the mechanical improvement. And we know that we have to improve the toilet situation, ADA and accessibility. So would it make sense if we're doing all of those other things at the elementary to do it there versus somewhere else? And that's a question that we'll put before everyone and say, what do you think makes the most sense? And this is what it might look like when you zoom in, is looking at where's the early childhood center? How do we take care of one entry instead of having multiple entries? Every entry we have, That's another secured location we need to think about. How do you staff it? How do you take care of it with technology? All of that is added dollars. And then what does it look like when we start enumerating it and saying, well, let's put pencil to paper and say, how many things could we improve as an addition to the elementary instead of doing a separate building? Believe it or not, at the elementary or at the intermediate school, how many have walked into that new main entry? Have you noticed the brick coming apart? When you walk into the intermediate school, it's your newest building, it's all great, but some of the masonry details they weren't completed in a way that are consistent with masonry details that we might want or want to see. And so there are a number of locations that on that main entry need brick and masonry repair work done already. And so that's really the only thing that building is lacking right now, is just needing to have a few masonry tuck pointing issues resolved. And the last one is there's something called synthetic stucco on the building, and that's something else that needs to be replaced. And that's usually up in the high areas around the media center and a number of other spaces. At the middle school, John enumerated that big shopping list, but we've been doing work on it as dollars are available with the referendum that was passed in 2017. But here's just a few of the things that we do need to address to continue to bring it up to code, take care of issues that are just needing attention. But for the most part, nothing really major there. It's all just things that are aging. The central plant does need attention, and so that's part of the project. And then we could also talk about what to do with the media center and creating, and is it a possibility to move the media center to make it more accessible, make it a place that's a destination, particularly during lunch. Believe it or not, most media centers today we put right next to the cafeteria. It increases its utilization, and the other thing that I tell folks is it's okay if somebody spills in there. If it's used, and we have to use a few extra hours to clean it and maintain it, it's better that a space is used if you're paying for it than have a space that's not being used at all. But it's an opportunity here to move administration, relook at the media center, and have that be something. ADA compliance is also an issue there. And then there's the high school. Building maintenance can't be talked or understated. It is a big challenge. Safe and secure is something that at a high school level, we're actually less concerned about it than we are at the elementary and middle school levels. And the biggest thing is because you always have so many people coming and going. And if somebody wants to do harm, what we're learning at this level is when are they probably going to do it if they're coming here from the outside? They're probably going to do it like they did the last two that have happened already this fall nationally. They did it at things that are happening for events after hours. People coming in with the crowd, moving out, and how do you manage and maintain that? 95% of the violence that happens in a high school happens where? Inside the building already. It's student on student and student on staff. And that's 95% of the violence that happens in your high school. So we look at that very differently. Again, going in and just saying what spaces need to be looked at and improved. And then starting to get in and say, how can we make those improvements? The kitchen cafeteria needs a lot of work. If you think about what we're serving today versus what we served in 1976, I miss Wiener Winks. I think they still make a comeback every once in a while. But today, we are expected to do fruits and vegetables and fruits and vegetable processing. That needs to be separate from meats and other things. And then you look at your dish return and how all of that is handled. And if you look at the picture on the bottom, what's ended up happening is everything that's needed for the kitchen keeps pushing out into the cafeteria. And what happens as it pushes out into the cafeteria? There's less and less space for kids to eat. And so then what happens is we start compressing lunch periods and things like that, and kids have less time to eat, or they eat on the run, so to speak. But those are things that are already happening in the kitchen and cafeteria. Science, the rooms were built too small to begin with. If you think about what's going on in chemistry, chemistry is one of your smallest rooms in the building. And think about what happens in chemistry. And those folks have been working in those conditions for a long, long time, and that's the top left corner there. Fixtures and amenities all need work. The greenhouse is in desperate need of work, and there's just lots of things going on in the building that need attention because of the fact that curriculum's evolving, and as John mentioned, things just get old. Music needs a refresh. Those little pit areas are great, but what do they pose in terms of a challenge? Folks with disabilities, right? Acoustics is another challenge in music rooms today. The wood shop. When you start looking at dust collection systems and power distribution, and if you look up at the top up there, what we're struggling with filter sizes and things of that nature. Because today, oftentimes it's hard to find parts for pieces of the systems that are in some of the buildings across the district's footprint. It's hard to find parts because the systems are so old. Welding shop also needs the refresh. The athletic locker rooms need upgrade and improvement, but the biggest thing is one of the most popular programs in the district is your weights and fitness area. And that place is packed. And how many people have seen the fact that it is so popular that the equipment is kind of pushed outside down the hallway, and one teacher is trying to watch the activities that are going on in 3 different areas and trying to keep everybody safe. And then finally, the media center, as I talked about, it's if you're looking for a quiet place to go, the media center is the place to be. But the media center suffers from location, 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 location. And the other thing it suffers from is if it's hard to get to in the morning and the evening, if you're doing group work, it's really hard for students to get together. And a lot of what we do today is group-focused, group work. And if you've got a group of 4 students working together, one's got athletics, one might have a job, one might have responsibilities at home, and all of a sudden, when do they find time to do things? And part of the reason why we put media centers next to cafeterias is because that's oftentimes the most productive time for that group of folks to get together and actually get their work done. So here's one idea on how that area might be reworked depending on what we think is a good investment. Here's one idea of how things might be reworked to meet all those new needs and provide other opportunities. Move the media center, rethink administration to create safe and secure entry, discuss what is it special education is or how it's distributed throughout the building, improvements to toilets, and above all, kind of expanding that kitchen cafeteria area as well. Also, there's been rumblings about, do we have enough gym space? Do we need a pool? Do we need community room and community space? Just like we talked about the early childhood center, oftentimes it's easier to put some of those amenities with an existing structure than it is to build a separate facility. Again, when you start thinking about, well, if you put a pool somewhere else, what's one thing that you would really like to have and you never seem to have enough of? Locker rooms. So if you need locker rooms for a pool, when it's not being used for the pool, it might be an amenity that could be used for physical education or something like that during other times. Your community room could be used for a green space, for use of a gym, or for your auditorium theater here, or for event swimming. And what kind of pool would you want? We do it all. We see everything from splash pads to large 50-meter pools. In fact, right now at a middle school, we're designing the 2nd largest pool in the state of Minnesota, and that's at a middle school because of the fact that middle school is where they would like to see it as a physical education opportunity. And so the size and the body of water is something that they looked at in terms of, well, we can use it for competitive swim, but at 50 meters, guess what they teach in it? Kayaking, paddleboard. They've got all kinds of activities that happen in that body of water, given its size. But that's something that you need to look at and say, what is the investment? What is the value? What could it be used for? And so on and so forth. So that's really the bulk of what I have in terms of just wanting to talk about and say, again, if we're doing all the things that John brought up in his presentation, is getting all of that fixed in this building an opportunity to say, it's time to look at our academic component and say, what is it that we can improve upon to address those concerns as well. I think that's the last slide. Yep, I believe so. Oh, so this is just the second slide showing that if we were to do a separate amenity, maybe it's located up above the elementary school there, and that becomes a community center, early childhood, pool facility, and things of that nature. And again, looking at the fact that, is it money better spent doing a separate facility? Then what can't we do somewhere else and provide that additional flexibility?
And thank you, Troy. And they're certainly going to stick around in case you have specific questions for them. Just a couple more slides if you're following along. Certainly everything that you heard comes with a price tag. Nothing is free. Nothing we talked about here is free. You're not going to hear a full-blown presentation about finance this evening. Lisa Voisin from Baird Financial, who is our financial consultant, will be here on September 22nd for another community meeting, and she's going to run through what our portfolio looks like as a district, tax impacts, mill rates, et cetera, et cetera. She's going to go through that. I have just 2 slides, so an abbreviated version of what she's going to show you. The first slide is mill rate. Think of mill rate as rate of taxation. The easiest way to understand it, if you look at the box in the top right corner, we have a mill rate increase from last year to this year of 7.74 to 7.86. So that is an increase in your mill rate of 0.12. The easiest way to understand that is move your decimal point two places to the right. So that would mean if you own a $100,000 home, that's a $12 increase in taxes. If you owned a $200,000 home, you double that, $300,000 is triple that, etc. If you look all the way to the far left of the screen and at the top, you'll see the mill rate as it existed, real number in 2013-2014 was 11.94, 11.92, 11.29, 11.18, 11.14, 9.77, 8.93, 7.74. The district has had a decreasing mill rate, which means decreasing school portion of your property of your taxes for 7 consecutive years. The 8th year, this most recent, is an increase of 0.12. What we're seeking to do is to be responsible and be attendant of the fact that, yes, everything has a price tag, but also we want to make sure that you are being treated respectfully by the school district of Amory in regards to its finances. How did this happen? Debt fell off. We are largely a debt-free district. We're one of the top 10% of districts in the state for being debt-free. But here's the trick with debt, and you'll hear Lisa Voisin say this when she's here on the 22nd of September. Districts that are debt-free usually have buildings that are falling apart. We don't have buildings that are falling apart. This building in places is falling apart. The elementary in places is falling apart. But the other aspect of districts that have no debt is this. Districts that are progressive in the way they educate kids have debt. They have debt because they're investing in the future of educating kids. And that's what this is about for us, to come up with a way to address our concerns and to create educational adequacy for our kids and for our staff. Last slide. So what does it cost? If you borrowed 20 million, 30, 40, 50, 80 million, and I'll talk to you about 80 million in a moment, that would be your impact on mill rate. So let's just take 20 million just as the easy example. It would be an increase of 0.85. meaning $85 on a $100,000 home, meaning $170 on a $200,000 home. The same is true of the math left to right on 30 million, 40 million, 50 million, 80 million. 80 million, some of you might be thinking, someone actually might want to say, I don't want to steal anyone's thunder, if we're going to do all this work, let's just build a new high school. 80 million is a new high school. 60 to 80 is your ballpark price on a new high school. That's just reality. That's not my number, that's just reality. And if you want to talk to two folks that have built new high schools, you're lucky. There are two people in the room that have done just that. 60 to 80 is what you're looking at. So that's a snapshot of the portfolio you're going to see presented to you by Lisa Voisin when she's here on the 22nd of September to go through in depth where we stand. And I think that is the last slide for presentation purposes. Questions and comments. Before we get to the actual questions and comments, there are 3 spots for you to come up. I know it would be easy just to yell it all from where you're at, but not everyone's going to hear you. So if we could have you at a mic, that would be very helpful. So if anyone has questions or comments that they wish to make, there are 3 spots. Simply come up, introduce yourself, and do your thing.
I have a question for both Troy and John. I talked with Shawn, maybe 3 weeks ago. I have informally been asked to do some research and gathering of information around a community pool for, I don't know, the 7th, 8th, 9th time in the history of Amory since the 1970s. Something that we've been tossing around is a collaboration. The things that have held up a pool in the past have been the maintenance and the sustainability. Nobody really wants to own it in the long term. And I said, what if we did a collaboration? What if the school partnered with, and we created an entity that is an aquatic facility that included a community center, that included a child care center. And the city has indicated that they would be interested in collaborating, and maybe helping with some of that funding. And then talking with the other piece that I kind of was thinking about when you talked about this fitness area, I know that the hospital has been looking at, for some time, their physical therapy area needs space. They've been wanting to move that fitness center out so that they can expand downtown into that whole space with the physical therapy. Is there an opportunity to collaborate there with a fitness center all together, with your, like you said, with your fitness? Have you worked with someone like that, or some kind of project like that? And is that a way to help make something like that happen without the school district or the school itself having to bear all the cost?
We, probably the best example we would have is the Hermantown YMCA. And that was actually a collaboration between all of the same entities, city, healthcare, and school district. And the YMCA became the umbrella that took care of the facility programmatically. And when you put all of those things together, there's a competition for space, right? If it's going to be open to the public, when is it available for physical therapy, and when is it available for the community? When is the pool available for the school district, and when is the pool available for the community? And so who schedules that, who manages that is usually the challenge that most facilities that I've seen that have operated that way struggle with. And so having somebody like a Y or some other third party has proven to be very helpful. Not always, but it is a financial burden that a school district or healthcare or the city would need to carry operationally.
One of the things we talked about or looked at, if it would be a potential, is creating that entity within the community of Amory. So there would be that separate entity that would maybe do grant writing and those kind of things. So rather than have the Y come in, but then there would be hired staff that would also do those kind of things to help the scheduling and the planning.
Joan and I did meet approximately a month ago, and the substance of our conversation was really 4 bullet points in regards to a pool or a facility such as a pool. There's a lot of variations of that. Where, obviously, is a question. Where do you put it? How much would it be? who maintains it and pays for the cost of maintaining it. And the big question, which we don't know, is how does the community feel about it? The last time this community was asked about that was in the fall of 2016. And we will be doing a survey again this year, and that question will be on it. The last time we asked, the results were as follows. It's the way that you answer the question is it is a high priority, a medium priority, a low priority, or you didn't respond, NA. And the results were 40, 20, 30, 10. 40 felt it was a high priority, 20 felt it was a medium, 30 thought it was a low priority, and 10% simply didn't weigh in. So those were the most recent results we received. We're looking for new results, and we're going to find out what people think in October of this year. Fritz, you're up.
Yeah, quick comment. You know what the definition of a pool is, don't you? It's a hole in the ground you throw money into. The question I have is just in regards to the $10 million for the building and wide mechanical replacement. How long will that take, and will that interfere with things that are going on during the school year?
We do. John and I go through it together all the time. We do projects that are renovations bigger than this that take multiple years. And right now I'm doing 2 schools that started construction almost 12 months ago, and they won't finish until next fall. And is it a disruption? To some degree, absolutely. I'll tell you this, that the kids enjoy it, the staff hate it, and it has nothing to do with just the interruptions. It's just what does it do to do as a disruption? Kids like the change and the commotion that happens around them as a distraction. Staff often are a creature of habit, so moving from room to room to room each and every year. But oftentimes, that's just part of the process of getting it all done. And it's amazing what you can get done in one summer. We do probably mechanical system conversions that are the size of this building in over the course of one summer. We'll probably start before the kids leave, go a little bit into the fall to try to reduce the disruptions as much as we can, but we do those projects all the time.
Perhaps, John, you could speak to Hudson. That's a recent example that you were a part of that did a monstrous upgrade of what they were doing while school was going on.
Monster is a small word. That was a project that not only included a lot of deferred maintenance and mechanical systems. If you happen to be at Hudson lately or saw it during remodel, again, the heavy remodels were done during the summers, over 3 different summers, and the additions happened during the school year. Okay, so if there were more, educational adequacy things, we'll call them, that happened, maybe there's additions or other things going on. You would phase it accordingly, have proper safety plans, exiting plans. That project was $70, $80 million, and that was 17 months long, but that was continuous, okay? Summers being the most busy.
Questions? Go ahead, Fritz.
Science classrooms, that was a big issue in 2017, that the science classrooms really needed to be upgraded. So that was 4 years ago. And yet, you've done all these other things, and the science classrooms still haven't been upgraded. I mean, I'm looking at things here like you added tennis courts, but you couldn't upgrade the science classrooms. So I'm a little confused as where the priorities are. Are the priorities for education for the kids or for the sports?
Go ahead. The priorities in this district will always be academics, but when you're talking upgrading the science classrooms, you're talking well beyond the amount of dollars it took to put in a tennis court, which was $250,000. We couldn't upgrade one science classroom for $500,000 potentially. It is a big endeavor. So it will always be academics, but you also have to talk about a safety and security issue. When you're talking tennis courts, we had some 15 of our 15 and 16-year-old girls walking from here to North Twin Park unsupervised Monday through Friday for 3 months a year. Now they're here, they walk out the door, and they're at their courts. So it was a much safer proposition. But yes, science is a priority, and you saw it on the list, certainly. Go ahead, Troy.
I was just going to say that you saw the amount of money that was poured into the Family and Consumer Ed Lab, and that stretched the budget for 1 year. And we did look at science. We looked at some of the vocational areas as well. And to make the improvements necessary for those buildings or those components of the buildings, when I talked about the fact that when you replace a roof, you just don't replace the roof. You got to go back and look at the structure and then look at the snow load. Science is very similar. Once you pull science apart, the number of upgrades that have to happen because it's deemed a hazard, some of the rooms are deemed hazards, you have to start upgrading other systems that then just catapult it into another price range that really doesn't fit within the financial structure that the team has to work with right now.
First, let me say I appreciate your questions, Fritz, because it is essential that we ask those kinds of questions. What are our priorities? But I'm here to say that we're not setting those priorities independent from you. That's why you're here. That's why we want you here. And that's why we're asking our community. We want to know what they think. Maybe our community says science classroom upgrades isn't a priority. I'd be shocked, but they might say that. So we're here to get your feedback, and I appreciate those questions. Other questions that folks might have? Or comments. Certainly doesn't have to be a question.
Okay, mine is just about the whole pool situation. Right now, for summer school, we are busing our kids to a different school to let them get that added confidence, education, physical fitness. We live in a community surrounded by water. Our children should have the knowledge of how to swim. And if we were to have it in our school, it could become part of our physical education classes. I just feel that's something that would be very beneficial for our community.
There's a delay, and that's very strange for me. And Clint's laughing at me. Thank you very much for that comment, because we're talking about a pool that we need to learn more about from all of you, and not just the 40, 50 folks that are here, but what does our community feel about that? Again, the 4 questions: where is it? How much is it? Who's going to manage that? And lastly, what are we going to do in regards to figuring out the future of a pool for this district via a community survey? So I'm as curious as anyone as to what the results will be. 2017 is a lifetime ago, and the community of Amory does, yes, send their kids to New Richmond. And Osceola has a pool, Baldwin has a pool, Unity has a pool. We don't. But let's see what the community has to say. The only thing that I would say in regards to that is it would be a tough proposition to not address the stuff that needs to get fixed, but yet put in a pool. That might be a bit of twisted logic to do that. I'm not suggesting that that's what you're suggesting.
Ditto.
Okay. Go ahead.
Again, I think we love the idea of nice things. And again, putting money into our kids is the best that we could ever do in life, I guess. But and especially with the education that they get here. But I really think you hit it on the head there, is when you have a facility that's leaking water, through the roof, we need to fix the roof. It looks like we need to fix $32,000. $32 million. Yeah, I wish to. $32 million of just priority ones. I mean, that's the priority one. And you mean what you did is you did a strategic plan. What we need to do now is come up with that strategic plan into the planning phase here. We need to get some real numbers, and we need to know how to move forward with this, because again, these priority ones need to happen. So, and again, that, the mill rate looks great because we've been going down, down, down. But at some point, let's be honest, we could have just stayed normal and still had less of these issues. Now, I guess maybe in regards to engineering and whatnot, I would like to see, so if we need to replace the roof, and you made some really valid points on, if we're going to be replacing the roof, we have to replace the brick. We have to, there's plumbing, piping, the HVAC, all that stuff in our roofs, I mean, that's got to go anyways at the same time, most likely. I think we're going to have to probably clump a lot of these things into place if we're going to do a remodel. And then also think about having the possibility of that additional aspects afterwards, the additional of a pool or whatever we have. And I will just say, being a government employee, if you really want to slow things down, get the city involved.
I won't tell anyone you said that, but I think it's being taped. I get it. If you're going to have more than one entity managing a pool, you're going to slow the process down some, certainly. Another item that I don't know that we really hit on a tremendous amount, and I know there are folks in the room that are concerned about it, the elementary is packed to the gills. I mean, we don't have a single solitary spot left for a classroom teacher to be. I mean, they'd have to be in the bathroom and teaching a class in there. I mean, it's packed. And we've got 50 new elementary kids. We're as packed as we've ever been. We've got a child care facility that lines the northern half, or the northern wall, in essence, of our elementary school that's taking some 5 or 6 classrooms from elementary. We love our early childhood, clubhouse setting, we do. But it's not the best space for it. We got kids in the hallways. We're out of space entirely. So we have to address that issue, and we have a child care need in the city of Amory. Just ask our businesses, do they need child care? And they will scream yes. So perhaps child care gets combined with pool in some way. That's also an option. Just throwing that out there. Other comments or questions that folks may have? You're up, Keith.
Well, just to make a comment about, people are saying, well, why didn't we keep up on our buildings and things like that? And Dale and I were on the board. We went through 4 to 5 years of budget cutting. Now, this went from 22, 23 million to 18 million a year. The state was cutting our funding in that. We had to get lean, but we also wanted to keep the technology and other things for kids going. And part of that is George got a lot of bubble gum and Band-Aids. I mean, we went from things where we had switchgear on fire and we just bandaged it up to keep it going. So it wasn't that we didn't understand what was happening to some of our buildings, but we just needed, because of budget-wise, to prioritize to the kids. And here we are with a referendum to try and bring things back up to what it should have been, that we could have done probably more along the way.
I would say that when you walk buildings, and John and I walk a lot of buildings. I practiced nationally for 20 years, and I've tried to stay regionally, just Minnesota, Iowa, and Wisconsin the last 10 years of my career. Your buildings, when you see them from the street and you come here for a basketball game, they are immaculate. Everything that people can see and touch, from the floors to the walls, the staff here does a great job. But if you lift a ceiling tile and you take a look at what's above there with regard to the mechanical system, it's frightening. And if you take a look at, the exterior walls on the back side of the middle school, there's a lot of work that needs to be done there. And I really would say that this district is fortunate to have people who are dedicated and who spend a ton of time making sure that the buildings are presentable, and it just doesn't happen everywhere. It just doesn't.
Other comments or questions that folks may have? So here's our path forward. This isn't the last of our engagement with you. We're meeting here this evening on the 30th of August. We have another community meeting on September 22nd. I highly encourage you to come for 2 reasons. 1, to see what the picture of our finances is in complete fashion. But 2, and just as importantly, you're going to get to see a draft version of the school perception survey that goes to our community, and you're going to have an opportunity to weigh in on what questions we ask and how we ask them. We've already got 3 drafts. We're on to our 4th draft soon, you're going to see a product that's nearly complete, but it's not done. So you'll get an opportunity to weigh in on that. September 20th is our next board meeting. They're going to weigh in. September 22nd, you can weigh in. And on September 30th, the board's going to meet again, approve that final survey, goes to the printers, and we want to get results and all wrapped up by the end of October so we can talk about results as a board and with you in this setting in November. That's our hope. We have building tours that are an option if you want to see the horror show that is when you pick up the ceiling tile. You can come on September 29th. There's another, if you go to the next slide, on October 6th. We also will have an opportunity for you to see, and it's not just here, elementary, middle school, and intermediate school as well. We have another board meeting on October 25th. We're hopeful to discuss survey results. If not October, it will be November. We don't know the timing on for sure when we get results back. Then we have a board meeting on November 15th. The value of that board meeting is we'll refocus what our said plan is based on community results, based on finances, and based on your feedback. And then if the board's going to decide to go to referendum, if you go to the next slide, I'm not sure if we have, no. The next slide doesn't include December. December is when the board would choose to, or not choose to, go to referendum in April of 2022. So, we thank you for your feedback. We thank you for your comments and your questions. We appreciate that you spent a beautiful evening with us rather than outdoors. I'm going to stick around. Troy and John, if they can, will stick around. And if anyone has any questions, please let us know. Thank you once again.